September 23, 1972. The Philippines changed forever. On that night, President Ferdinand Marcos addressed the nation through a pre-recorded broadcast. He declared martial law. His justification? To save the republic from a communist insurgency. But what followed was not salvation. It was state-sponsored terror. For 14 years, from 1972 to 1986, the Filipino people lived under dictatorship that targeted anyone who dared to oppose it. Students, journalists, farmers, religious workers, and lawyers. This is the story of those dark years, a story of 3,257 known extrajudicial killings, 35,000 documented cases of torture, 737 disappearances, and 70,000 incarceration. But behind those numbers are faces, names, families destroyed, and a system of violence designed not just to punish but to spread fear. To understand the abuses, we must understand the context. The late 1960s and early 1970s were a time of social unrest. The students took to the street during the first quarter storm of 1970, protesting rising inequality and American imperialism. The Diliman commune saw a UP student barricading their campus against military forces. Then came the Plaza Miranda bombing in 1971, an attack that killed several people in the politically rally. While initially blamed on communists, many believe it was a false flag operation, a pretext manufactured by the regime itself to justify martial law. Marcos seized this moment on September 21, 1972. He signed Proclamation Number 1081. 2 days later, the nation woke up to a new reality. A Congress was closed, media outlets were shut down, and hundreds of opposition figures were already in military custody. Marcos called it a constitutional authoritarianism. For the Filipino people, it was a nightmare.
To analyze this conflict systematically, we will use the conflict triangle, a tool that helps us understand the three key elements, the actors involved, the issue at stake, and dynamic of context that shape how conflict unfolded. The actors are the parties that who perpetrated violence and those who resisted. The issues are the not causes why people targeted. What is at stake and dynamics are the patterns. How did the violence operate? What made it spread? By examining these three corners of the triangle, we can see not just what happened, but how state terror became systematic. We can understand why wounds of this era remain unhealed nearly 4 decades later.
Let us begin with the actors. On one side, we have the perpetrators of state violence. At the top was Ferdinand Marcos himself, the dictator who concentrated power in his own hands. He abolished Congress and demanded undated letters of resignation from every member of the judiciary. Supporting him was the military, led by General Fabian Byrd. The armed force expanded dramatically under Marcos, becoming the instrument of repression. The Philippine Constabulary, the country's national police, operated detention center where torture was routine, and there was the vigilantes, paramilitary groups that emerged with military support, targeting communities suspected harboring insurgents. On the opposing side were the victims and resistors, political opponents like Senator Bignoy Nino Aquino Jr., who would later be assassinated upon returning from exile, student activists who lead protests despite the ban or public assemblies, journalists who continued to write for the underground Mosquito Press, printing the truth mimeograph machine in the secret location, farmers and workers who dared to strike like the workers of La Tondena Distillery, who staged the first strike under martial law in 1975. Religious workers who used churches and sanctuaries for organizers, and the Moro people in Mindanao who faced a secret war as a military battle, the Moro National Liberation Front. These were the actors this deadly conflict. The second corner of the triangle is issue. What were people fighting about? Why were they killed? On the surface, Marcos justified martial law as a fight against communism. The Communist New People's Army was growing, and Marcos used this threat to justify his iron grip. but the deeper issues were more profound. First, there was economic injustice. Under Marcos, the Philippines experienced its worst economic collapse in post-war history. While Marcos and his cronies enriched themselves a system called crony capitalism, the majority of Filipinos sank deeper poverty. Marcos opened the economy to foreign corporations, created the first export processing zones with no onion, no strike rules, and began state-sponsored labor export. The third quarter is dynamics, the pattern of violence that defined this era. Marcos did not just arrest people, he created a system of terror. Let us look at the numbers. Documented records of show 3,257 known extrajudicial killing, but these were not simple deaths. Victims were often tortured, mutilated, and their bodies dumped in public places. A tactic called salvaging. The message was clear: opposing the regime, and your body will be found on the roadside as a warning to others. Some reports even describe acts of cannibalism. True, such accounts remain contested. There were 35,000 documented cases of torture. Detainees were subject to electric shock, waterboarding, beating, and sexual violence. 737 people disappeared, never seen again. 70,000 were incarcerated. Many were held without charges, without trial, without any legal process. Over 50,000 individuals were detained. The military denied habeas corpus, the right to challenge one's detention in court. In the context that enabled this, the Cold War, the United States supported Marcos as a bulwark. On September 23, 1972, Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law, claiming to protect the Philippines from communism, but instead imposed a 14 years dictatorship marked by widespread state violence. Perpetrators include Marcos, the military under General Fabian Ver, police, and vigilantes who wielded power through killings, torture, disappearances, and imprisonment. Against them stood resistors and victims, political leaders like Ninoy Aquino, student, journalist, worker, farmer, religious figure, and the moral people in Mindanao, all fighting to uphold truth and justice despite grave risks. Behind devastating numbers lie personal stories of loss and courage to defend dark and chapter in the Philippine history.